Welcome to my podcast, Worlds Collide. I'm the host of the show, Victoria Daute, and I talk with my international guests here in the show about the experiences they made in their new country versus their home country. So in today's episode, I talked to Christian from England, and he talks about his experiences when he lived in Estonia for 3 years. He and his ex-partner, who was Estonian, they decided after graduation just to go there for a little bit, but that somehow turned out to be 3 years. And yeah, so he talks about that, the good and the not so good, and what he realized in that time, what he's very thankful for, and also how hard it was sometimes, and what a difference it makes when you make an effort to learn the language. I think he says really interesting aspects about living abroad. Yeah, listen in. Here it is. Hi, Christian. I welcome you to my podcast. How are you doing?
Thank you so much. I'm doing very well. I'm sort of walking off the gym today. I was like, yeah, it was one of those things where I didn't sleep properly and I was going to the gym. That's already a bad start. I go there and I'm like, I know I have a show to do later today. I'm going to make it, but can I get this gym session in? Because I'd skipped it. The day before was when I was supposed to do it. Work came up, things come up, life gets in the way. So you move forward. You're right. You move forward to the next day and you're like, right, I have to do it now. Nothing is going to stop me. I'm going to be there, and I did it. And now I'm sitting, and I'm like,
I don't want to do it.
No. I mean, it's commitment, isn't it? It's consistency.
Yeah. Sure.
Obviously, we were talking off camera about podcasting in general, and I think the same rule applies. It's like discipline, consistency. Just you keep doing it, and you just get into a rhythm, don't you?
Yeah, right. And once you're into it, then it's easier. But you have to get there. That's the hard part.
It takes a while, yeah. Even with my show, there's been like waves. Like right now, it's like a new wave. It's like it feels like a new chapter. And I'm sure, as you said, like this is a new show that you're running here. You'll have that too. Your first 20 episodes, your first 50, first 100, like there's like chapters where it feels different. You get more into a rhythm and you start finding yourself and you're like, I could tweak this. I could change this. I like this. I'll drop this.
Yeah.
La, 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 la.
Yeah. That's what I'm hoping for. To get a little bit more spice into the shows.
Spice.
Maybe.
Okay.
I mean, a little bit spice, yes.
Awesome.
Okay. So you are calling right now from England?
That's right, yeah.
Where in England?
Manchester.
Manchester.
I'm not from there.
Are you a big soccer fan?
No. I'll say this. I'll say this about Manchester because, yeah, it's either, if you live in Manchester, chances are you're one of two people. You're either a massive football fan or you're a big, music fan. Something like that. I'm the latter, more music. But again, just a quick synopsis. I am an actor, voice actor, podcaster, musician, content creator, basically a creative individual. Yeah. So Manchester, by that extension, is a fantastic place to be. I'm originally from London. Can't stand it. And so I worked this out the other day. I haven't lived in London since 2014. So next year it'll be a decade of avoiding my home city.
Wow, that's a long time, yeah. But you visited.
Yeah, I see family, and that's it.
Yeah.
I wish they would move, to be honest.
So you wouldn't have to go there.
It's just, do you know what it is? It's big city syndrome. That's what I call it. I'm sure it's the same. Do you know, actually, I'll tell a funny story. I was living abroad. I was in an office one lunchtime, and there was a guy from somewhere stateside, But he happened to have lived in New York for a period, maybe 4 or 5 years. And he's standing there and he's talking and he's like complaining about the subway and just all this other stuff. And I'm sitting there and I'm listening. I'm like, is he talking about London? And then I hear him, he mentions like, oh, you know, like New York, it's like this, it's like that. Da, 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 da. And then I'm like, oh, mad. Oh, wow. It sounds just as awful in New York. It may be worse. Like, you know what I mean? I mean, don't get me wrong. There are always good and bad aspects to anywhere that you live. And London has its fair share of good things. Yeah. But I say this all the time. There are certain places in the world where unless you have a certain amount of money or you're earning a particularly good living, you're either living it up or you're struggling. Yeah. And I feel like a lot of people increasingly are struggling in London.
For sure. It's super expensive.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I saw there's this meme thing going around right now where every once in a while a picture will be posted to like Reddit or somewhere like that, and it will show you a genuine place that's being advertised in London that is ridiculous. I'll give you a few examples. There was one recently where it was a shed. I'm not kidding. A shed in someone's backyard, right? And they were advertising that like for £1,000 a month, right? Bills not included. You know what's funny as well? Just on a side note, if you ever advertise a property in London or anywhere in the UK, it'll always get you to like lay out the floor space. Like, oh, this place has like, I don't know, I'm crap at maths, like X amount of floor space. Of course, in this advert, there's no mention of floor space. Yeah. And it's like, of course there's not, because you've got like 2 steps and that's it. That's your... Yeah. £1,000 a month.
For apartment,
what?
That was the same in San Francisco. We had those things where they were joking about renting out a tent in your backyard for $1,000 a month, or like your closet, like Harry Potter style closet, for $1,000. Yes, no window.
Isn't that paying to live in the closet? Most people are trying to get out of the closet. You're paying to live in it.
Oh, hey, you're in the great city though.
Yeah, but see, that's a lie. See, okay, this is a great show to be talking about this, because there's a big difference between going on holiday somewhere versus living somewhere.
That's
and
right.
Obviously, if you become an expat and you choose to move somewhere, it's like a big conscious decision, but you have to do your research. If there's anyone listening right now who is like, oh, hey, I really want to live in this country, and, you know, it's been my dream since I was a kid, and, you know, I want to do this and I want to do that. Be careful. Don't get me wrong, there will be elements to it that are like a fairy tale. For example, I have a friend who is originally from England, of Polish heritage. He's lived in Poland, England, everywhere, and he chose to move out to Switzerland. And over the years, he's constantly tried to get me to move there, and I'm like, yeah, maybe one day, but I've still got some stuff to do. He loves it. He said it's a lot of hard work, and there were difficult times, but it's a dream because of all this amazing stuff he gets to do as far as like exploring, driving around, seeing the country and stuff. Mm-hmm. And so there are those fairy tale moments, is what I'm trying to say. But at the same time, it's hard. You know, you got to make a lot of sacrifices, compromises. It's not all sunshine and daisies, which means you have to kind of learn to appreciate the small things so much more, while you're kind of struggling, trying to kind of find your footing. But after some time has passed, you could make it work. You know, you can. I've been in Manchester now maybe 3 years, and throughout that time it's been like that, you know. And sometimes I'm like, maybe times will get better. Other times I'm like, maybe this is just life, you know. Appreciate the good times, the few and far between. But I guess what I'm trying to say, to put it in a nutshell, is you just got to kind of be prepared. Like, don't let the advertisers lie to you. Don't fall in love so much with the dream of the place that you want to go that you don't consider the drawbacks. Yeah. It might be that your dream is something you've got to work towards, and so you can still move to the country you want to go to, but you might have to slum it a little bit before you get to that, you know, ideal that you're considering. So it's not so much keep that visualization, keep what you're trying to work towards, but just accept that you might not be able to like just immediately jump into that life. It might take some time to get there.
Yeah. Also, what I always think, like when you're moving to a different country, you never get to go on vacation because you have only a limited time, and then your family kind of expects you to visit.
What do you mean?
So like for me, it was always like, okay, so I have like 2 or 3 weeks, and I guess I have to go to Germany, and then it's not really vacation, so you never really go on vacation.
No, you're right. Yeah, because
I mean, for other people, it's like, oh, you're going to Germany. It's so cool. But for me, it's like, I'm just going to Germany. I have to go.
See, that's another thing as well.
It's not that I'm experiencing
That's
anything
another thing,
there.
I think, as well. If you like travel, going back home to your home country is more like, if you're going back to like reset, to see family, to reconnect. It's more to rest. It's not really to explore. That being said, I don't know, you're seeing it more and more, especially since like it's getting more and more expensive everywhere to live. You're seeing more and more people take like domestic holidays now. They're actually staying at home and exploring their country. Lord knows I'd like to explore more of the UK. Like when I came back from Europe, that was one of the biggest things. I was like, as soon as I get an opportunity to go anywhere new, I'm going to go there. I'm going to be there as much as I possibly can. But I get what you're saying. Like when I lived in Estonia, I think and then this was because of monetary problems. Like I was just restricted in what I could do. I think I went back like once in 3 years. Maybe twice, but one time to see family. Because that's all I could afford to do at the time. It was tricky. It was not easy.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
I totally get it. I get it.
So, why did you move to Estonia?
Basically, I was studying at university. I just finished. At the time, I was dating someone from there.
Okay.
And we were basically kind of like, what do we do? 3 months out of graduation, I've still got this customer service job. I hate it. It was fine when I was studying.
Sure.
But now I'm not studying anymore. Yeah, no, I did the degree to sort of work in a different field, and I'm still working in customer service. I'm like, hey, what gives? But of course, if you study a degree, first thing they say is, well, where's your experience?
Yeah.
And you're like, but I got the degree. I learned how to do this thing. And they're like, yeah, but like, how can you prove that you're any good at this? And I'm like, give me a shot. And they're like, no. So I was like, what do I do? I'm stuck. Yeah, what do I do? I'm stuck. Yeah. And I just sat down with my ex, and just we were drinking coffee in a coffee shop somewhere, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. What do we do? We need to change something. And she floated the idea of sort of going to Estonia for a bit. A bit being a key word.
A bit. Okay.
Like maybe we go there a few months, come back. But you know how it is. 3 months turns into 6 months, turns into 3 years, and that relationship didn't work out. But like when I was there, one thing I didn't expect was that I would build my marketing career while I was there. So that was what I studied. That was like my day job stuff. And it was invaluable. I'll forever be grateful for Estonia for many reasons, but yeah, for giving me a footing in marketing. And also, I saw the country in a unique way, because while I was with my ex and her family, I saw things that I think the average person doesn't see. You get like a window into someone's life and their family and everything. And I saw so much of the Estonian culture that kind of opened up a different perspective on life. It opened up.
Yeah, for sure. You were with the locals.
Yeah. I saw some crazy stuff, some interesting stuff. And I'll always be grateful for that. And I think that when I another thing as well that it did for me is, which I didn't expect, is it made me appreciate home more. When I came back, so about 1.5 years in, 2 years in, I started getting homesick, which I never thought would happen, but I did. And I missed family, but I think I also missed the way it is back home. And I know that you can relate to me here. I know a lot of people can relate. there's always a part of you, wherever you are in the world, if you've chosen to be an expat in another country, there's a part of you that exists that recognizes that it's like you miss your homeland. You know, it might be that you've moved to another country and you've got a genuinely better life elsewhere and you make a new life, but there's always a part of you that will always need to come back sometimes, not necessarily settle, because I think the day-to-day is something you always have to kind of sit and plan and work out. And as I said before, it might be a better life than what you had back home. But there's always that part of you that seeks to come back. And there's like, I guess like, and this is just me speaking, like my personal beliefs, but it's like a spiritual element to it. It's like, when I was in Estonia, I recognized that a lot of people there have like a spiritual connection to their homeland, and it means a lot to them. And I just never really had that. Like, I never felt that way about England. And when I came back, that's when it kicked in. And I was like, wow, I'm so grateful to be back here. I'm so grateful to be around English people again. They drive me nuts as well, but also I love it. I don't know, like I feel like closer now to my homeland than I ever did before. And I think it comes down to that old adage of, you know, just spending time away, you know, absence makes the heart grow fonder.
That is because you did not enjoy your time abroad as much. I'm just asking that because for me, it was whenever I visited Germany when I was still living in California, I was like, all right, this is just here, but so times have changed and I live in Texas and it's not my, I don't love it as much, let's say. And so when I go back now, I'm like, oh, this is so great to be here. You know, I think it's just a comparison, how much you like the place where you live at the moment.
Okay. I'm going to answer this question in a few different ways. So before I answer it outright, because you reminded me of something. I moved to Estonia in 2017. I saw my family a one-off in 2019. And I remember I was already beginning to miss them and miss home then. But I remember being back and that feeling that you've just expressed, I felt that. I wasn't under an illusion. I knew if I'd have moved back specifically to that area, it'd be like how it was years ago, like and probably more difficult. But at the same time, I knew I missed England. I knew I needed to get back. And I sometimes wonder if maybe that was like, because I wasn't happy in Estonia, maybe like, you know, I was like, oh, this is different. This feels different. And then it's that whole thing of like,
yeah.
You know that old expression, you know, the grass is green where it's watered. It's like if you're in like a bad relationship, for example, and there's a difference between being in a bad relationship that you just need to get out of versus going through a difficult time and getting through that time together. Two different things. I wondered sometimes if maybe I just needed to stick it out in Estonia, you know, forge myself a different life there. It wasn't that. It was just that I'd made the most of the time I was there. This particular relationship wasn't working out. And I will say that as well. The personal relationships you have when you're abroad do shape your experience. If you're there alone, that's an experience in of itself. And I mean, crikey, you could be having a great time and enjoying yourself and taking photos all the time, but like still feeling like real intense loneliness. Like, I'm sure you felt that at times. Like, there were times when I lived in Estonia when I probably one of the most loneliest times in my life, because I felt disconnected from home. I missed people. It's not like you can hop on a train and just see family. Like you know, you're kind of stuck in a way, and you kind of just got to get through it. And you know, I remember sometimes like calling family and being like, "Hey, I miss you. Like, this sucks." And they were kind of like, "Well, why don't you come back?" And I'm like, "It's not that simple." but I wanted to.
Yeah, I remember that too. When I was my first year in San Francisco, I was like Skyped with my friends at home. And then I'm like, I can do all these great things, but I don't really know a lot of people here. And the people I know are not necessarily my kind of people. So didn't always want to hang out with them. So I was like, okay, I think I just have to do all these things by myself all the time. And it's a beautiful city, and I have a lot of things I could do, but I don't really want to because I have to do them all by myself. And to meet new people, it's an effort. You know, I mean, if you're a student, then it's easier because you're already like surrounded by people who have the same interests as you, or you are in a international group, for example, if you do like a exchange program. But if you go there for work by yourself, then that's a different experience.
Yeah, and it's interesting as well. I mean, I'm just talking from experience here, my personal experience. I'm sure it's different for other people. Whenever I would be in an international group, I'd always find those people insufferable. I don't know what it was like about the like mixture. You get a few people that were cool. I remember going to some like speakeasy poetry nights, and there were some really awesome people there, and I genuinely enjoyed that. People from as far as like India and Somalia and like Russia, France, Germany, you name it, like people, America, even like people from all around the world. That was really cool. But I think that was more because, as you said before, you've got shared interests. It's more of your type of people. Like everyone there was there to like read poetry, play music, whatever. So it was definitely my kind of vibe. But then when there was other groups, you know, like away from that, it was that kind of like everyone kind of trying to show off, I guess. I didn't get it. Like I was like, you know, I thought the whole point of this was to connect and feel like a little less lonely, because you know how it is when you're speaking another, because it's not your native language, you're speaking another language. So I was learning Estonian, speaking Estonian, and you know, like I had native friends there that I made, and I think a lot of that came down to my commitment and effort to be connected to the culture. And like I always dive head first in. Like if I move to a country, or if I visit a country, I pick up a book, I start learning phrases, I start exploring, and that opens up doors. But you know, natives don't always welcome you with open arms, because there's a suspiciousness about it. There's like a what is it you want? You know, like what are you looking for? Yeah. And also, you know, you can speak the language, but that doesn't mean you're like necessarily accepted. Yeah. I will say on a caveat, most Estonians were very welcoming, very nice. But there was, I think, an uneasiness, you know, at all times. But I think that would be the same anywhere you go. I don't think it's specific to there. I think it's just like, you know, people are sometimes uncomfortable with it. But I did my best to kind of to mix with people, and I think I made the most of it. And I made some good friends there that I'm still friends with to this day. So I guess the point of this aspect of the show is like to underline that, you know, people make the time, people make the place, people make the experience. It's all about people. But there's a lot to be said for when you're a foreigner in another country, you do get treated differently. You know, it's a different kind of experience. You get welcomed by certain groups, you get rejected by others, and you get kind of cold apathy. Like, if anything, I prefer to be rejected by a group versus apathy. Apathy's worse. Like, there's kind of like this coldness. Like, I don't know. But at the same time, I dig it. Like, in Estonia, it was very cool because people were very just kind of quiet, doing their own thing. For me, it was like an education in how to be a successful introvert. You know, like, I'm an introvert at heart, but I was, I guess, eager to connect with people because I was lonely. And that was an element to it that I had to learn. Now I'm back in England. I'm very comfortable being alone. I enjoy company, and I you know, whenever it happens, I embrace it. I make the most of it. But I'm also very I'm able to be by myself and function in that way. And I owe I think a lot of that to my time in Estonia, because there was a lot of that. And people there are quite comfortable sitting in a cafe reading a book by themselves. Not to say that doesn't happen in England, because of course it does. But yeah. you don't. I don't know. Like it was interesting. I think that if I'd have stayed there longer, I think I would have had to have adjusted myself more. And I think that's an issue as well, because I think all of us as human beings, to be truly comfortable, we have to be our truest, most authentic self. We have to reverberate in a way that feels comfortable for us. But when you're in a different country, I don't know that that's always necessarily possible, because you still have to adjust yourself to your surroundings. You know, like I'm sure when you go back to Germany, you vibe in a different way to how you do in the States. Like it's there's different expectations. Like I know Americans tend to be a lot more extroverted and like loud, and you know, not always, but like that's generally the expectations. If you're quiet, which Europeans always are, there's a bit of a difference there. It's like, why are you so quiet?
Yeah. Yes.
You know, 'cause I remember when I came back from Estonia, I was so used to being quiet that I just, you know, I remember weirding out my family. They're like, why are you so quiet? And I'm like, oh, am I? Well, I'm just used to this now.
Oh, really? So that was one of the biggest differences to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it came down to the company that I was keeping at the time as well. Because there's plenty of Estonians that are loud and all that, you know. It's just it's the company that you keep. You know, obviously, you spend enough time around certain people, it's going to bring out certain qualities in you. Maybe minimize others, I guess. But yeah, at one point it was like that. But ultimately, when I did come back and move back, I think I kind of came out of my shell again and became like who I am. But I think for me, I had to understand that I am an introvert at heart, but I have the ability to be extroverted as well. I think it's a lot of it's circumstantial. Like I love going to a party, but I'm also very comfortable sitting in a cafe or by myself. You know what I mean? It's like two different worlds to me.
And why did you consider moving back? Was it because of the relationship that didn't work out, or was it other things that happened too?
So that actually ended while I was there. But I stuck around for like another year, and I remained friends or ish. You know, it was what it was. But I looked at it more as like I had a good thing going marketing wise, like experience wise. And so I stuck there for another year, and then I just knew that I'd come back in 2020. Now this is where it gets interesting. Timing wise, it's crazy. Well, this is the thing. I knew I was coming back in 2020. COVID started having rumblings around. I think it was like November 2019 officially, but no one really started talking about it till like February, March time. But I was so invested in my own stuff that I didn't really pay attention. But we'll get there. We'll get there. Ride with me for a second. So I knew I was coming back. I knew that I'd done like everything I could really do there. Maybe it'll change one day, but I can tell you now in Estonia, there's just not money. Unless you work in IT. I mean, maybe it's changed in the last few years. I doubt it's changed. These things take time. But what I remember was that there was a ton of like IT jobs. So if you were like a programmer or something, great. And a lot of like Russians would come in and take in those jobs. Or like people from other countries would take the IT jobs. But if you weren't working in that field, there just wasn't any money. And like, it's interesting, like what we were talking about at the beginning with regards to advertising and how you can shape how a place looks versus how it really is. Tallinn, the capital, is often referred to as like being like a technological hub in Europe, and that is true. They're doing a lot of stuff with like blockchain and ID verification and all this kind of different stuff, and they're at the forefront of that. And there's a lot of like startups. There's a big startup culture there, and that persists to this day. and there's a lot of success stories coming from there, like Bolt being an example. Then obviously Skype was originated there, etc., etc. But when you talk about the day-to-day of living there, most people will tend to base their operations there or begin them and then move elsewhere, right? Because, you know, there's various reasons for that. The day-to-day living of there is what it is. Maybe it's better somewhere else. Maybe it's worse somewhere else, etc., right? But what I understood is for the type of roles that I was doing, I could potentially earn, well, I would definitely earn more money if I moved back to England. And I needed to get myself out of that particular situation that I was in. Like I needed to, something needed to give, and that came down to me. I just wasn't going to push myself out of it with the particular roles and the money that was being offered. Even you know, I remember at one time I got like a promotion for a particular job, and I was doing well, but I wasn't earning that much more, and the same sort of role in England would have paid me a hell of a lot more, pardon my language, but that's the reality. It wasn't all about money though,
so that's a little bit frustrating,
right? But you know, it was also like just how it was. Like I didn't hold it again. Like it just that's just how it was, you know. But it was invaluable. Like I said before, I'm very grateful for what I was given. Like I built my marketing career there. I got so many opportunities. Like where I wasn't getting paid as much as I wanted, I got to build like experience that I probably never would have got in England.
Sure.
So I was very, very grateful. Now, to answer your question, like I got what I needed, but then there were other elements. Like the system of the way things were run in Estonia was a bit of a pain, because you've got like a mixture of new versus old. So you've got some stuff which is a hangover from Soviet times, like just processes. Like they got this thing there called the police border guard, which is just a pain. Like they go on and on about this like ID system thing that they've got, which sounds great on paper, but whenever you're trying to do things and arrange things, it's just a bit of a pain to get things sorted. Sometimes you still have to queue up and like write things with a pen and paper. Like I don't know, it's just a bit of a nightmare. And obviously if you're a foreigner, it's even trickier. Like I'll tell you this, a lot of the people that I met there, like foreigners, would always say like, oh yeah, I never need to learn the language, like everyone speaks English. That's their experience. I can't count how many times learning Estonian like saved me in a situation, be it queuing up at the police border guard. Yeah, no, I had like my friends that would help me, but there were so many times like I would get on a bus and I'd always, you know, I've told this story many times, but I would always begin any conversation with a local like "Kas te räägite inglise keelt," which means like, can you speak English? And then and this was a compliment to me that I was told by locals. They would assume that I was native because I had the accent down. So they would then just look at me curiously like, yeah, like,
why?
Yes. And like, what relevance does this have? And then I would explain that I was English, and they'd be like, oh. And I used to have fun with it. I'd just start speaking English with like my accent, and they'd be like, oh, okay. Oh, you're English. Okay, right. But there was a lot of times when, you know, someone wouldn't speak English, and normally it'd be someone like, I don't know, in their 50s or 40s or something.
Yeah, sure.
You know, and they
because they did not learn it.
Precisely, yeah. So it saved me in many cases, and I just had a very different experience to a lot of those expats that were living there, and it always used to make me laugh. I was like, you're just having a very different experience to me. Like, I don't get this.
Yeah.
Anyway.
How long did it take you to get comfortable with Estonian? Because I think it's a different language. It's Finnic, right?
Yeah, Finno-Ugric.
Like a version of Finnic.
It's very tough. I was never fully fluent in it. I never purported to be. But I got to a certain level where I was able to... Like, I'll say this. You know, like how sometimes you just hear a language and you understand what's being said without like understanding it. Like you get the gist of things, you know, like it just clicks in your head, you know, without thinking. That happened, and that freaked me out because I was like, huh, okay. I spoke what I always called broken Estonian. Like I could get by, people would understand. I'd maybe use wrong cases for things. But the language has like 16 cases or something.
Cool.
It's insane. I think I learned like 4 or 5 of them, so I did well considering.
Good on you, yes.
But you know, there were people that I met that only spoke in Estonian, and the whole basis of our relationship was that. Like, you know, I spoke to them in their native language. They didn't speak English. It still kind of blows my mind to this day.
Yeah. And it's nice that you made an effort. Other people, they couldn't even, because they didn't even take an effort to talk Estonian.
Well, this is the thing. I'll say this: I understood their perspective because, and this is incumbent of a bigger problem. See, growing up in England, it's a bit different now. It's changing. People are beginning to learn languages from a younger age, but I think it's like 5, from the age of 5 now you learn like another language, right? But in Europe, guys, people have been doing that since time immemorial. It's standard to speak 3, 4 languages. It just is. And generally, when I spoke to locals about it in Estonia, they tell me like it was all about job prospects. You learn whatever, English, Estonian, Russian, or German or something to increase your job prospects.
Yeah, okay.
So it made perfect sense.
Yeah.
Anyway, in England, it just wasn't the case. Like we learnt languages from like the age of 11 at like most state schools. And that's already kind of too late, really. You know, it's like, yeah, you're learning from phrase books, but that's not really learning a language. Like if you want to learn a language...
That's how I learned too, though, English. Yeah,
you can get the basics down, but I'm sure you realize when you started speaking it versus like...
You cannot, no. Like when I finished 10th grade, then I had it for already 5 years, and we had it, I think, 4 times a week for an hour, or sometimes for 2 hours. And then I remember when we were finishing 10th grade, I asked my teacher, so when can we speak English? And she was like, well, you should be able to speak. You know all the vocabularies and you know all the grammar. But I'm like, I cannot build a sentence in my head. No, I felt not comfortable. I did not feel comfortable speaking English until I lived in Australia for a year. And then it took me 6 weeks until I could say a sentence. I understood everything people told me, but words did not come out. They were just stuck in my brain. That's
another element as well. I remember my ex-partner's father would sometimes say to me, you know, like he felt bad that he couldn't speak more English. And I was like, dude, like, you understand everything I'm saying, don't you? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, that is way more important than how well you speak it. Like, and I'm not sitting here judging you. I used to say to him, like, look how bad my Estonian is. Like, I'm trying. And he got what I was saying. He was like, yeah, I guess you're right. Like, it's comprehension and understanding matters so much more. And as you said, like, it's practice. I always say the 2 ways you can learn a language are either you move to that country and you just practice all the time and you force yourself and you put yourself in situations where they don't speak your language, so you have to speak their language, or you date someone from that country and you speak it all the time. Yeah. But again, there has to be a commitment to them forcing you. Like my then partner, she didn't actually speak it that much with me, to be honest. Yeah.
Okay,
like,
so you spoke English?
Yeah. So we'd sometimes speak it like if we didn't want someone to know what we were saying, like if it was someone that was rude, and we were back in England, it's kind of useful. It's like, you know, that's useful. But other than that, it was, you know, what need was there? It was quicker to do it in English. Sometimes I'd find myself speaking Estonian with natives because it was quicker than speaking English if I wanted to get a point across. Weirdly, it was sometimes quicker. But yeah, it's just about how much commitment you put into it in practice, and like anything else in life, the more you put in, the more you get out. But
I was just wondering if your job was in Estonian or in English.
It was all in English. Yeah.
Okay.
There was one job that I took that was it was interesting. It was a startup, sort of mid-tier. No, they weren't really a startup anymore. They were like a small to medium business, but they were operating internationally. There's a lot of companies out there that they have a headquarters in Estonia, but they'll have a lot of international clients. And this particular company, most of its clients were in the States. So it was catering to that audience, but like everyone that worked there was like, you know, they were all Estonian, so they were all speaking either Estonian or Russian together. And I was the only English guy in the office. And it's so small. We're talking, there's like 4 people in the office maximum. It was weird. Okay. And then like in the middle of winter, you can imagine like going to this office, it's cold, it's dark, there's snow everywhere, and like I'm the only English guy, and but you know, it was fine. It was what it was. I made the best of it. I'd also worked in those big companies where there's like tons of, you know, foreigners and everyone speaking English, and it's, you know, I had like a lot of different experiences there.
Okay.
But yeah, those international ones, they generally speak English by proxy, because they just have so many foreigners working there, and it's just easier. But yeah, I had many opportunities to practice, all the time. I think most locals were impressed, because I think they looked at it like, wow, like, because it was bad, that whole thing of like people not bothering to learn. They'd always say like, oh, what need do I have? And I was like, you just get so much more. Yeah. Like, because that's the thing, like I lived a lot in Tallinn, but I actually, because of my then partner, I got to explore like and live in all parts of the country. I lived in the south, I lived in the north, I lived on some of the islands off the coast. Like I was very lucky. I had like a lot of experiences, and fair enough, maybe those other people didn't always get those experiences, but you get what you put in. You get like, you know, you put yourself out there, you'll get those experiences. And I felt like a lot of the time they were missing out. Like all they seemed to really care about was just party in the city, and just only hang around with other like foreigners, which I don't know. I didn't get that. Like, it's the same as like, I remember one time I went on holiday somewhere and we were in a group, and the native food, we had like an all-inclusive deal. We were in Bulgaria. We had an all-inclusive deal, and it was brilliant. Free food, free drinks. Oh, I was in heaven. And we queue up to get like the food, and the native food was like, I'm a big food guy. Like I was just like, oh my God, this is so good. This is so good. Right? And one of the guys that I was with, like, he'd just get like burger and chips. And I remember just like, it just used to, pardon my language, it used to piss me off. For sure. I was like, dude, like, what's the point traveling several hours to get here and then just having like burger and chips? And he was like, oh, I just don't want any of that. And I was like, try something different.
I know.
You might surprise yourself. I was like, this food tastes amazing. You don't know what you're missing out on. But he just didn't care. And like that's the reality, man. You miss out. Like when I was there, I learned. Like, here's an example. Like I don't drink alcohol anymore. It was just many reasons for that. But yeah, woo. Anyway, back then, you know, I would drink now and again, and I discovered, for example, that my whole life I had the wrong perception about vodka. See, growing up in England, vodka just tasted trash. We had like basic supermarket vodka, and then we had like, I think Russian Standard was like the only import we had, and it was awful. It's still awful. So when I went there and like the locals were like, you got to try the vodka, I was like, nah, vodka's horrible. And they're like, yeah, but you haven't tried. And they had Russian vodka and they had Ukrainian vodka, and they would drink it straight. But here's the thing, different drinking cultures. They would eat food, you know, which is like what you're supposed to do, you know. I'm sure you do this in Germany too, where you have like the special types of bread, the meat, like the salamis and stuff, like gherkins, all these things. And you just make yourself like little mini sandwiches. Yeah. And it goes down nicely. And that helps. And you know, people in England do that too, but like not to the extent they should. But the more important thing, and the reason I raised this story, is that the quality of the alcohol was exceptional. Every time I had like Ukrainian vodka or Russian vodka, I never once had a hangover. Okay. Not once. Never. The quality was pristine. It was even on a small level somewhat good for you. There were little tricks like if you were beginning to get a little bit ill and you felt yourself coming down with, say, like a cold or something, you were told to just quickly have like a small shot. It sounded crazy, like a small shot of vodka, and they keep it in the freezer. And that would actually help to alleviate it a little bit, or at least protect you a little bit from the potential symptoms.
That's what my mother says too.
Right, yeah. It's like these little things that you learn that you wouldn't learn otherwise, were you not to immerse yourself in the culture. And learning a language is a great way to do that, because I think that when locals see that you're making a conscious effort to ingratiate yourself, they feel more inclined to include you. You'll never be one of the locals, but you can be someone who's brought into the inner circle, so to speak.
Yeah, because you're already making an effort. They see that you trying to be more part of them versus somebody who does not even care. And so were they like still after 3 years things that you culturally did not really understand?
I never really had any issues with like not understanding them culturally, because I just understood we've just they've grown up with different things. You know, it's a different way of life, different history, different culture. You know, you just accept it, then you. Do you know what I mean? It's very strange, I think, when you go to other countries and you're like, why don't they do this? Why don't they do that? And it's like, because you are a product of your surroundings. Like wherever you are, that's just how it is. So I never really had any issues like that. I think sometimes I had a difficulty understanding people in the sense that sometimes I would mistake people's quietness or abruptness for like annoying. Like sometimes I'd think like people were annoyed when they weren't. They were just quiet, you know? Because in England, like growing up, like if someone just randomly started going quiet and they weren't like an introvert, you'd assume there was something wrong. So that changed, and then I changed as a result of that, and now I'm like that. Like I'm quieter, and I think sometimes people assume there's something wrong, and I'm like, nah, sometimes I'm just quiet, you know. So it's interesting. That was a bit of a obstacle, I think. But yeah, otherwise it was just a different way of life.
And was it like obvious for other people there that you were from the UK?
Yeah.
Like, did you do?
Yeah.
Like, and just not the language, but how you are as a person. Or
I don't know.
Visually, maybe.
Probably that. Like, I guess I don't look like a local, or I don't know. It never really came up much, to be honest. I think people always seemed quite warm when they learned that I was from England. You'd get like natural questions: "Why are you here?" Like, you know. But other than that, like people were very much just kind of like, do you know what I mean? Because I think there was always as I said before, a commitment to, you know, mixing with people, ingratiating myself into culture. And I think there was like, okay, well, you're here and you want to be part of this, so you're part of this kind of thing. That was the vibe I got. It didn't often come up. Most of the time, people didn't seem to care. I don't know. Like I always hear these stories about like when you go abroad and supposedly people are like, oh wow, if you came here, everyone would be like amazed at your English. And it's like, I never had that. Once in a blue moon, someone might be, you know, if we were like really far out in the country and you never get tourists there, they might be a bit like, okay, that's weird. But most of the time, you know,
he must have gotten lost. So he's here.
Well, you've gotten in, haven't you? Obviously, if you're there, it's because you're a local. But it's I don't know. It's just it's never really been a thing. I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm not like really like loud, obnoxious. I don't like carry myself in that manner. So I think I can kind of like just slip into my surroundings, you know, without causing alarm.
Were there things that you appreciated that were different from England?
Oh yeah, I liked little things like for example, when you be in like restaurants, you wouldn't really often get like situations where it'd be like really loud. Like I hate that when when you're in a like restaurant and someone comes in and just cuts through it, like just like they used to sometimes joke that the Finnish people were like that because they're like Estonians but very different. as well. And one of the ways that they're different is like they're quite loud,
Okay.
and that would stick out quite often. So that was an element I liked. I missed the food. I missed the, I still listen to the music, obviously, but I missed the food. Some of the things you can get there, you just can't get here. You just,
Okay.
or it tastes different,
Mm-hmm.
I miss how easy it was to get out in nature. I do kind of miss that. There's not to say there isn't nature and stuff here in England, but a lot of the time you have to like go out of your way to get to it. If you live in a city, for example, whereas there, like, you could drive, because Estonia is so small, you could drive maybe like 10 minutes and boom, you're in like the forest,
it is,
or the beach or something.
And when you were there, were there things that you missed from England?
I think I missed people. I missed being able to. I think I took for granted like being able to speak my native language. Like there were so many times when I'd be around only locals and they'd all be speaking in Estonian, and sometimes people would clue me in and make me understand what was going on, but sometimes they just wouldn't.
Sure. So you kind of sit in the dark.
Yeah, it was a lot of that. There was a lot of sitting around not knowing what's going on, and it sucked, to be honest. It was not easy. That contributed greatly to my loneliness. Just sitting there.
I know that too. So we have a few friends from different places, and if I meet, for example, my Polish friend, and there's another Polish friend there too, then when they talk Polish to each other, I'm like, all right, whatever. Just pretend I'm not here. I don't know. I feel like I would not do this because I think it's rude. Like when.
Well, okay.
I mean,
there's a
that's
caveat to this, though. If you're out and you've all met together and it's like a group, then speak what everyone understands, right?
Yeah.
But you have to remember, like, I was a guest in their country.
Yes, yeah.
And so, like, I never expected people to roll out the red carpet for me.
Yeah, no.
Well, I'm here, so everyone has to speak English now.
Sure,
like,
no, totally.
But at the same time, like, sometimes there were times when you could clearly see that I was like, pardon my language, like bored shitless, just on my it was very isolating sometimes, like that, and. I call it like I see it. Certain people were like, "Hey, I'm not going to be your translator all the time."
Sure,
it's tiring, and I was like, I get that, but you can't expect me to be like comfortable in this situation. Put yourself in my position. Like, how would you feel? I tried so very hard to understand, but it was at a level that I just wasn't at. Do you know what I mean? And plus, when people speak really, really, really quickly, as well, that changes things
for sure, because then you don't understand half of it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like I speak very quickly in English. I recognize this, but I slow it down if I know the person isn't native and they need me to slow it down, and to me it's not a problem. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, no worries. I don't know, I feel like on that note, I think you should always try and make everyone in your immediate vicinity comfortable. If there's someone with you that doesn't speak the language, maybe you just be with that person. You don't have to translate everything going on around you, but maybe just make an effort to make that person feel at least comfortable and part of the situation, rather than just like I don't know, like a dog in the corner that no one really wants to be there, like, I don't know.
Yeah,
that's kind of how it felt sometimes. Consider the prospect of moving to another country and how that might look. A lot of people romanticize it, and they consider like, it will be like all those movies I saw, those French movies when I was like 10, and it's all like beautiful, and there are idyllic moments like that for sure, but a lot of it, day to day, is
most people think about vacation and not living.
Sure, but that's very different. Vacation versus living somewhere, two very different things. And you have to think about the day-to-day, what that looks like. The inevitability of the fact that if you move to another country and, English is not widely spoken, then you're going to have some struggles. you know, because there are certain countries I know for a fact either don't speak it or it's spoken in isolation, like isolated instances, or people just don't want to because it's like, hey, you're in our country now, which, by the way, I think that's perfectly reasonable. I do. I do. Like the amount of times I saw foreigners come over, it was embarrassing. They'd be like, "Oh, like why can't you speak English?" And it's like, dude, you're in their country. Like, that's so rude to say. So, like, what I was saying earlier about like not feeling comfortable, like I never sat there and like felt angry at anyone. I felt sad about it, and I felt like this person that I was with could have made more of an effort to make me feel comfortable. But that was just a personal relationship. That was what it was. But the wider situation was that, hey, I chose to be in that country. I chose to be in that situation. Many people have been in the same position as me, that kind of situation. And it is what it is. You're going to find yourself in those situations. I'm sure there'll be other times in my life in the future when I travel eventually where that'll be the case again. And it's okay, because that's the nature of language and how it differs wherever you go in the world. Like, this expectation, you have to manage your expectations in a reasonable way, I think, when it comes to language and traveling around the world. But that what you gave as an example earlier, I think is different, because it's like, they don't, like, if 3 of you all speak the same language, but the other 2 speak a different language to you, it is rude for them to then just speak in their own language while you're there. Yeah, that is rude.
Yeah.
One could make the argument like, oh, but we need to speak that language. And it's like, I think it depends. You know, it's a lot of the time it comes down to circumstance. So I'll give you a really good example. I worked in hospitality when I was at university, and there was a particular hotel that I worked for about 1.5 years while I was studying, and there was a bunch of like Dutch exchange students, I guess. I don't know. They were like doing a hospitality program, so they'd come and work there, and then they'd go back, whatever. They were all really lovely. They were nice people. And they would naturally speak Dutch when they were around each other. And I remember like one night, it didn't bother me, because I'm like, hey, do what you want. Like, as long as like it's not 24/7, like, do you know what I mean? It's probably quicker sometimes. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like, but I remember one night we were just there washing cutlery, and it's like the end of the night, and a few of them are talking to each other a little bit, light conversation in Dutch, and one of the supervisors, who was English, starts having a go at them. She's just like, oh, that's so rude, how dare you do that, and I remember thinking in my head, like, maybe it is a little bit, but it wasn't like they were speaking, like, say, for an hour in only Dutch and refusing to speak English. It was like a 5-minute quick conversation, and this person just launched into them, and I was just like, I think that's unnecessary. I think you just have to kind of, because they would go back in and out, and sometimes they would even say like, oh yeah, we were talking about
yeah, that's nice though, you know. If they keep you in the loop, that's fine, I think.
So yeah, it's all circumstantial.
Yeah,
really.
sure.
It always comes down to that.
And since you moved back, do you still have that feeling of loneliness, or because like now you're back in your own country, you understand everything all the time, did that vanish?
No, because loneliness is something that all human beings have to deal with at all times in their life.
But I mean, just because of that not understanding.
No, I understood the question. I just thought it was important to add that, because it's something that, like, I think it's okay to feel that once in a while.
For sure, yeah.
Like, I think that there's something to be said for spending time with yourself and learning how to be comfortable in your own space. That's important. It's good for your soul. It's good for your well-being to reconcile with yourself and spend time with yourself. And if you don't do that, you should devote some time to doing that every once in a while. To address your question, yeah, I mean, I haven't found myself in a similar instance like those specific ones where it's like I'm amongst the people that don't speak my language. It's nice, being able to understand everything again. But it's different. It's a different way of life. It's difficult to explain, but it's like, it's just different. It's like, that was my life then. This is my life now.
Mm-hmm.
Am I happy to be back? Absolutely. I think the biggest thing I learned was that I can't be away from my homeland for too long, or like, if I were to move again to another country, I'd have to really think about, like, for example, like how often I get to go back to England. Like if it was like I was fully just moving to another place again, well, how often can I come back? If it's like once a year, I don't think that's going to cut it. If I can go like once every 2 months, hey, that could work.
So
maybe.
Something closer.
You know? Yeah, I think it's now I understand what I was struggling with a bit more. I can kind of look at it like, okay, if this happens again, I have to plan this in a slightly different way.
Mm-hmm.
I think the thing is, there was never a plan really with going there. It was always just a temporary thing that turned into an extended thing that, to be honest, like, I would have gone back earlier if it was financially possible.
Mm-hmm.
And if I had a plan. I never had a plan. That's the thing.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have to have like a concrete plan in life, but you got to have like a basic, like, okay, if I go back, this is what I'll do. I just didn't have that. Like the alternative.
So you didn't have an idea.
Well, the alternative was going back to London, and I didn't want to go back to London.
Uh-huh.
I still don't want to go back to London. Like, you know.
So you moved straight to Manchester?
Wow, we didn't finish the story earlier,
Okay.
so I'll finish it now.
Okay.
I decide I'm heading back. I know it's 2020 that I'm going to head back. I start making the arrangements, and it's like middle of February 2020.
Mm-hmm.
I fly back, tie up all the loose ends. It's all done. Go back home to London for like a week. Again, didn't plan any of that. I knew I needed to see family and reconnect. I did that. And then I just immediately got itchy feet. I was like, okay, I've said my hellos, and now what? I was like, I need to go. And so I got up and left and just went to Manchester, which sounds insane, and it was. But
without any plan? I mean,
yeah.
It was just, I was going to go to the next bigger city.
My plan was anywhere but London is better.
Okay.
Because it's different. It's a new. I needed something new. I needed something that. I'll say this as well, and this has nothing to do with London. This is just the nature of going back to anywhere you've previously been before. When you go back to like the place you grew up or the areas that you used to live, then it's no longer the same place. It might be like, you know, some of the buildings look the same, whatever, people look a little bit older, whatever, but like it's not the same place. Like I remember one time going back and looking at like one of my childhood homes, the place that I'd spent most of my teenage years and childhood. And I looked at it, I looked at the area, and I realized that like I felt nothing.
Okay.
No nostalgia, no feeling. So it wasn't that I missed the place, I missed the time. And of course the time is never coming back. That the time is gone, and it was a great time, and now it's past, and all there is now. And so with that in mind, I realized if I would go back and live in London, you know, I know what that life looks like, and that's not a life I want to lead. I'm not saying I'll never go back ever, but if I did, I'd have to have a plan, and I'd have to kind of have like a different way of life that I've not experienced before. And I don't know that city can really offer me that. Plus, there's something to be said for like, I like a little bit of a smaller city. Manchester's like London, but smaller, and it's more manageable. Tallinn was small. I like that. I like a place that's got culture and civilization, but is smaller, and you can also get away and like go to the countryside if you want, and it doesn't take like hours and hours and hours. So anyway, I move up. I got a basic plan in that like I decided to get the cheapest hostel I could find. and I had some money, not a lot, but I just would sink what I had left into a place, try and find a job and go from there, right? I figured, it'd be fine. No worries, no problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm there for like a week. It's miserable. The hostel is terrible. I'm sharing a room with like 4 or 5 people in double beds, and it's terrifying. And I'm sleeping like with a fist and just like my bag and everything close to me, and I'm like ready, tense the whole time. There's no toilet roll in this place. There's no hot water. It's cold. I shower in cold water. It's awful.
Sounds lovely.
And I'm getting desperate, and I'm like, maybe I made a mistake. Yeah, it was awful. I was like, what do I do? And just as I was losing hope, I managed to just about find a place. And I'd already been to the area, and I'd not liked the area, but I was like, what do I have? Like, it's either I check this place out, or, I sit in that miserable hostel. So I checked this place out. I met the landlord. Seemed like a good place, and I asked, like, hey, can I move in like now? And they were like, yeah. And I was like, like today? And they were like, yeah.
Awesome.
I was like, I'm sold. And I think they were kind of like, hey, can you like, I think they wanted it too. We were both like, please. Yeah. And I was able to get away from that hostel and move in.
Okay, so that all worked out.
Then we go into lockdown.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. Like, I sort of been paying attention to the news, but it seemed to me like a disconnected thing. Like, I remember when I was a kid, like looking at swine flu and stuff like that, and being like, "Oh, that's crazy," but it'll get contained, whatever. But then it didn't, and it became a thing, and then eventually the Prime Minister put us into lockdown, and I was like, "Wow, this is surreal." And there I was in this place I've never been, in a city I've never been, in lockdown with no job and no nothing. And I figured it out from there, really. But that was it. And I do wonder, what would it have been like if I'd have stayed?
Yeah, I wonder what would have happened too. It was really nice to talk to Christian, and it was so nice of him that he shared his experiences and that he was so honest about it. Not everything is always better, but he can still see all the positive out of it. Christian also has 2 podcasts that are definitely worth checking out. He always has really interesting guests with interesting stories on his show. It's the Christian Reeve Podcast, and also Live with Christian Reeve. And it's wherever you can listen to podcasts. You will find the names of his show in my show notes. And as always, thank you very much for listening, and I hope I see you next time. If you want to reach out, you can do this at Worlds Collide 123pod@gmail.com, or also on Instagram. It's Worlds Collide Podcast, just one word. So everything that you need to know is gonna be in the show notes. Thank you for the music. It's by Jazz by Serge Corando from Pixabay. I hope you listen in next week.